But one of the things that the players have been complaining about is that they have added more games to the schedule, but they haven't lengthened the season. So Satou Sabally was one who came out and said that there's too many back-to-backs, and that's what's causing some of the injuries that we are also seeing in the last WNBA season.
The Women's National Basketball Association wants to move training camp to mid-March, which puts it directly on top of the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament, and players are furious about it. What looks like a scheduling dispute is actually a labor standoff triggered by a rival league offering salaries 8 times higher than what the WNBA pays its best players. And everything comes to a head on January 9th, 2026. Before we go any further, we need to clear up something that's causing confusion. When you hear about Project B in connection with this story, you might think it's some kind of WNBA program or initiative. It's not. Project B is a completely separate international basketball league that directly competes with the WNBA. And that distinction matters when you're trying to understand why the league seems willing to pick a fight with college basketball. Grady Burnett and Jeff Prentice co-founded Project B, bringing serious tech credentials to the table since Burnett worked at Facebook, Meta, and Google, while Prentice co-founded Skype. They brought in WNBA legend Alana Beard as Chief Basketball Officer. The Financial Times first reported this venture in February 2025 as a $5 billion basketball initiative, though the actual name, Project B, didn't surface until Front Office Sports revealed it in October 2025.
We want to see the WNBA become a major sports league and be highly regarded and highly respected and have this be their full-time job. I feel like everybody's goal, if they get the right people in place in leadership in the WNBA, because it's kind of a mess from top down.
Consider it a working title or code name rather than the league's permanent brand. What makes Project B dangerous to the WNBA comes down to money. Guaranteed salaries start at $2 million annually, plus players get equity stakes in the league itself. The current maximum base salary in the WNBA for 2025 sits at $249,244, which means Project B offers roughly 8 times what the best WNBA players currently earn. 6 teams of 11 players each will compete in a Formula One-style global circuit, taking 66 players total across Asia, Europe, and the Americas from November 2026 through April 2027. Tennis star Novak Djokovic invested, along with basketball legend Candace Parker, former NFL quarterback Steve Young, and multiple venture capital firms. Initial reporting suggested Saudi Arabia's public investment fund was backing the league, but co-founder Burnett pushed back on that directly, stating that the funding doesn't include any dollars from Saudi Arabia. The league does have a partnership with Sela, which is a Saudi company, but according to Burnett, that's an event partner role rather than an investment stake. By early December 2025, Project B had signed 9 current WNBA players, and the most significant name on that list is Nneka Ogwumike, who happens to be the president of the WNBA Players Association. When your players' union president signs with your competitor, you've got a serious problem.
The players shouldn't have to play in off-season leagues to make more money. They shouldn't want to play in off-season leagues to make more money. They should want to take those 3-4 months when we're talking about other leagues like the NFL, the NBA, the NHL. They would want that off-season to rest their bodies, to rejuvenate.
The other 8 players include Alyssa Thomas, Jonquel Jones, Jewel Lloyd, Kelsey Mitchell, Sophie Cunningham, Camila Cardozo, Lee Meng, and Janelle Salayun. December 2nd, 2025 is when Annie Costabile at Front Office Sports broke the news about what the WNBA wanted to do. Training camp would move to as early as mid-March under the league's proposal, which represents a massive shift since the current collective bargaining agreement prevents training camp from starting earlier than April 1st or more than 30 days before the regular season begins. The NCAA Women's Final Four for 2026 is scheduled for April 3rd and 5th at Mortgage Matchup Center in Phoenix, which creates an immediate collision. Rookies coming out of college would arrive weeks into the professional season if they stayed to finish their NCAA tournament runs, and the WNBA draft currently sits on the calendar for April 13th, 2026. That entire timeline would need restructuring, and nobody seems to have figured out how that would work. CBS Sports laid out the core problem in straightforward terms, asking whether players would feel pressure to leave school early if training camp started in mid-March, just as the NCAA tournament was getting underway. Multiple news sources read this proposal the same way, seeing it as specifically targeting competing leagues. CBS Sports reported that it seemed obvious the primary reason for moving training camp to mid-March was to disrupt other leagues, calling out Unrivaled, Athletes Unlimited, and particularly the newly announced Project B. And here's why that tactic would work. The WNBA has something called a prioritization clause written into its contracts, which requires veteran players to report to training camp on time or face potential suspension for the entire season.
But right now, they're playing 5 months out of the year. They're not even playing half of a year. We want to see them add more games so then more revenue can come in, the league can grow. Like, that should be everybody's goal, but they're in a really sticky spot.
Move that start date earlier, and you force players into a choice between committing to the WNBA exclusively or risking their spot in the league that's been around for 28 years. The complications don't stop with the NCAA conflict. 7 WNBA teams share arenas with NBA franchises, which makes scheduling a delicate balance even under normal circumstances. The Indiana Fever share Gainbridge Fieldhouse with the Pacers. The New York Liberty play at Barclays Center with the Nets. The Phoenix Mercury share Footprint Center with the Suns, and the Minnesota Lynx use Target Center alongside the Timberwolves. The Los Angeles Sparks share Crypto.com Arena with both the Lakers and Clippers, while the new Golden State Valkyries share Chase Center with the Warriors. NBA and NHL playoffs run from April through June, so moving the WNBA season earlier creates more overlap and turns scheduling into a nightmare for venue management. Media rights add another layer of complexity. The WNBA just signed a deal worth $2.2 billion over 11 years with Disney, which owns ESPN and ABC, plus Amazon Prime Video and NBC Universal. That deal starts in 2026 and works out to approximately $200 million annually, representing a 500% increase from their previous contract. But ESPN also holds an 8-year, $920 million deal for the women's NCAA Tournament. Both leagues would be competing for the same network's attention during March, and college women's basketball has been delivering massive numbers. 17 million peak viewers watched the 2024 Iowa-UConn Final Four game, which made it ESPN's most-watched basketball game ever. Players responded with a level of intensity and unity that's been remarkable to watch. Napheesa Collier from the Minnesota Lynx, who also serves as WNBPA Vice President, delivered an explosive statement during October 2025 exit interviews where she called WNBA leadership the worst leadership in the world. Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever rookie, who's been credited with much of the WNBA's recent growth, responded publicly and backed Collier's position. Clark said she had great respect for Fee and thought she made a lot of very valid points, adding that this is straight up the most important moment in the league's history. The league's been around for 25-plus years, Clark said, and this is a moment they have to capitalize on. A'ja Wilson of the Las Vegas Aces went even harder. She admitted being honestly disgusted by the comments Kathy made, referring to Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, though Wilson also said she appreciated having people like Fee in the Players Association representing them. Gabby Williams from the Seattle Storm addressed the schedule strategy directly during All-Star Weekend in July 2025, making the quiet part loud. Williams said it was very clear the league wanted to push away all other leagues, adding that it would make sense if they were paying players more, but that still wasn't the case even with the new proposals. She said it was very clear they wanted to push unrivaled out and push athletes unlimited out. Sophie Cunningham even warned of a potential work stoppage, promising that players would not play until they got what they deserved. She said that's kind of where things were headed, unfortunately, calling it potentially the dumbest basketball decision business-wise ever. Commissioner Engelbert defended her position at a press conference before the finals in October 2025. She said she'd never been a quitter and was entering her 40th year in business that month. Never been a quitter, never shied away from tough situations, she told reporters. The WNBA just came off its best season ever in 2024, and the numbers tell a story about both the opportunity and the tension. Average regular season viewership on ESPN hit 1.19 million, up 170% from the previous year. The WNBA draft drew 2.45 million viewers, which represented a 328% increase. The All-Star Game pulled 3.4 million viewers, up 305%. Total attendance reached over 2.3 million, climbing 48%, while the season produced 154 sellouts, up 242%. Average franchise value hit $269 million, jumping 180% in a single year. Total league revenue reached approximately $226 million in 2024, with projections landing between $710 million and $1 billion for 2025. Despite all this growth, the league reportedly still lost over $50 million in 2024. Though officials attributed those losses to reinvestment in expansion and infrastructure. The proposed CBA changes would raise the maximum base salary to $1 million, push average salaries over $500,000, and lift minimum salaries above $225,000. Salary caps per team would jump from $1.5 million to $5 million. But here's where the real tension lives. Players currently receive approximately 9.3% of league revenue, while NBA players get between 49 and 51% through the year revenue sharing model. Kelsey Plum articulated the core demand in simple terms, saying they weren't asking to get paid what the men get paid, but rather asking to get paid the same percentage of revenue shared. The value is clearly there when you look at expansion franchise fees. Golden State and Toronto paid $50 million in 2023 and 2024. Portland paid $75 million in 2024, and Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia are paying $250 million each for teams starting between 2028 and 2030. The Golden State Valkyries became the first women's sports team valued at $500 million. January 9, 2026 is when all of this comes down to the wire. The current collective bargaining agreement extension runs through that date, with either party able to terminate with just 48 hours' notice. No agreement means the expansion drafts for the Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire can't proceed, and those teams are supposed to start playing in 2026. Free agency normally begins in January but remains frozen until a deal gets done, and players have indicated they're willing to strike if necessary. The WNBA has declined to comment directly on the schedule proposals. CBS Sports reported that league sources characterized the discussion as merely an opportunity to explore the potential footprint of the season and ways to further generate revenue, which suggests this might be a negotiating tactic rather than a firm demand that the league intends to enforce. A league experiencing unprecedented growth now faces a player rebellion and competition from a startup offering salaries 8 times higher than what it currently pays. The proposed solution of starting training camp in mid-March would create a direct conflict with the NCAA Tournament that helped fuel the WNBA's own popularity surge, all while attempting to block players from participating in competing leagues. The president of the Players Union already signed with that competing league. A January 9th deadline is approaching fast, and the WNBA faces the most consequential labor negotiation in its 28-year history. Whether this mid-March proposal represents genuine strategy or negotiating leverage, it reveals just how threatened the league feels by alternatives that can offer players the compensation many believe they've earned. What happens in the next few weeks will determine whether this moment of unprecedented opportunity becomes a turning point or a breaking point for women's professional basketball.